recording. So for anyone who's just joining this afternoon for the first time at the conference, welcome. My name's Andy McGowan. I'm the Head of Engagement at the charity Caring Together. This morning we looked very much around some of the experiences of carers. So we looked at in terms of the impact of caring on carers, on their health and well-being, on education, on employment. And we also looked at their experiences around sort of with health and social care professionals as well. So this afternoon, we're going to be sort of shifting gear, shifting focus and looking at in terms of some of the support and what's happening in response to some of that work as well. So this first session is going to be very much focusing on some of the support that's available to carers, both locally, but also nationally as well from that sense. So you can hear from a range of different organisations. And as I said, these slides will be shared with everyone as well. So I'm going to start the session by introducing sort of various members of the All Age Carer Service. So this is a carer support service commissioned by Cambridgeshire County Council and Peterborough City Council to provide support for carers of all ages across the county. As you can see, it's delivered by 3 different partners. So it's delivered, so Caring Together, ourselves, we support carers aged 18 plus across the county as part of this contract. Centre 33 are the commission provider to provide young carers assessments, transitions assessments and young carers support, and Making Space provides support to carers supporting someone aged 18 to 65 with a mental health condition. So they're going to each talk about the support that they offer as well, and then we'll also be hearing from the parent carer forums about the support they can provide. But I'm going to hand over to my colleague, who is Jill from Caring Together, who's going to talk about the support that we provide to carers. So hopefully you're there, Jill.
Yeah, hi.
Brilliant. Can you see the slides okay, Jill?
Yeah, that's all fine, thank you.
Brilliant.
Okay, hello everybody, welcome to the conference. As Andy says, I'm just going to cover the support available mainly from Caring Together, but over Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So as Andy mentioned, what we have is the support available for adult carers across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So at Caring Together, we support carers no matter who they are, who they care for, and what their needs are. So we have a person-centred approach. It's really important that we are looking at the carer as an individual and their family and how they can be supported. So whether that's through information and advice, whether that's breaks from their caring role or having somebody to talk to. It's really important for us at Caring Together that carers are supported before they enter a caring role, during their caring role and after their caring role as well. We know that there are those key transition points throughout their caring role and their caring journey, and we want to make sure that support is available throughout those key points. But also we know that the caring role can be quite fluid and changeable as well, so that somebody might be coping at one stage, but then something can drastically change and they need extra support. So it's being flexible within that as well and covering those key transitions. It's also important that carers have the opportunity for their voice to be heard, which will shape our services, and I've got some key examples of that as we go along, but not only through us at Caring Together, but outside of our organisation, so through our campaigning work, etc. So let's talk about how carers, I'll give you an example of how carers and their voice has sort of shaped the way that we do things and the support that we can provide. We have a Carer Friendly Tick Award, which was born from the Young Carer Forum in Norfolk. Young carers were discussing the support that they received at school and how that could be better. They came up with 5 standards of the difference that a school could make that would mean that no stone was unturned in the support they provide for carers. Those 5 standards really made a difference, and we saw a massive increase in the support that was provided for carers within schools. We've now rolled that out across employers, health settings and community settings as well. So this is something that we can offer that has a huge support that came from the voice of carers. Okay, next slide please, Andy. Okay, so what are our services that we provide at Caring Together? This is the support available for carers, adult carers 18 plus. So we have a specialist carer helpline, so that can provide information and advice. The details for that are on our next slide. Carers can call us directly, they can self-refer, or professionals can call in as well. We will then triage what support is needed for that carer. Again, it's a person-centred approach, so it's looking at the carer and their family and what their needs are. We can provide a dedicated caseworker if that's something that's required. Another thing that carers have shaped as well, we know that carers were asking for some more help within understanding their caring role and having some training that can support them within their caring role. Sometimes they felt they were thrown in at the deep end and wanted some practical learning. So that's something that we now have in place. Carers can join our learning and training and receive that information and support. We also support with planning ahead and looking at emergency planning. So we have something called a what if scheme. The best way to explain this is to give you a scenario. So let's say Mr. Smith cares for his wife, Mrs. Smith. He goes to the pharmacy to collect a prescription, has a fall. Emergency services are called. He needs to go off to hospital. Hopefully he'd be carrying his carer card. With that information, emergency services should know to look for. We would be contacted to say that Mr. Smith has had a fall. When Mr. Smith registered his what if card, we would know the details of the person that he cares for, so his wife, and we would know the next of kin who we would contact in an emergency, and we would put that in place. We would contact their contact. So, for example, say they have a daughter who's in Scotland, and we let her know, and she says, "Yeah, I can take over from Dad. I'm on my way down." In that scenario, it might be hours before she can get there, and Mrs. Smith needs support. So we would put support in place for up to 72 hours. That's under the what if scheme. And this also helps with hospital admissions as well and gives carers that peace of mind, and it's free. So we can also provide opportunities for breaks from their caring role. So this can look like things like carer hubs that we have, so having that peer-to-peer support, trips and activities. I know that on Friday there's some carers that are going on a trip to a Christmas market, which sounds very exciting, and do like lots of nice fun things and just have that break from a caring role. We also provide the Carers magazine, which is a quarterly magazine, which has lots of information, but also has all the activities that are happening, not just through us, but other organisations as well throughout that quarter. So groups that you can go along to and find out more information about. We also have an e-bulletin as well, so that comes out through email, so just to give you an update of the things that are happening. It's really good for the Carers magazine as it comes through quarterly, so we find maybe that carers are quite well supported and not needing a huge amount of support at that time, but we know that things can change. So that magazine is a nice reminder every quarter that we are here, and if things change, we can put more support in place. It's just a reminder of those details. I've got our website, which is on the next slide. That's where you can register to receive the magazines. You can do that online really easily or through the helplines that will be on the next slide. We also have lots of online information and resources through our website. Again, you can check out the website to see what all that information is. It's a really great tool to be able to find solutions, and maybe it's easily accessible as well. We also have the Carers card, which is the what if card, so that can be used to help identify as a carer. This was particularly useful in lockdown. The lockdown was really good to be able to identify as a carer, but that can be used in many different scenarios. And it's really important, like I said, that the carer voices are heard within, and they can shape the way that we deliver things and our policies all through Caring Together. So that's kind of a whistle-stop tour of the support that's available through Caring Together. Sorry, next slide, please, Andy. So this is all of our information, as I mentioned. So we have the helpline, so that's the email address that will go directly to the helpline, and the telephone number as well. So carers can call themselves, or professionals can call. Our website is equipped with so much information, so you should be able to find everything on there, or you can call the help. And please do connect with us through our social media. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, please do that. We keep that up to date. You can see our services, how they're developing, how they're shaping, and how you can access support through those things and get involved in our campaign work as well.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Jill. Just to ask in terms of answer a question from Beth. So in terms of the carers card and the what if, they are the same thing. So it used to be just a what if card, so just for people who had the emergency plan. for what we found, particularly during the pandemic, but also for people who are wanting to register with their GP surgery to show they're a carer from that perspective, or just have it to show they're a carer. It has that dual purpose as well. In terms of questions about support in Peterborough, absolutely. We've been looking. Peterborough is one of the areas where we've been struggling since the pandemic to get a venue. But in terms of if you either get in touch with the helpline or if you sign up for Inside News, we can definitely tell you about in terms of when the next things are coming up from that perspective as well. Because then we've had trips sort of focused on some of that area as well, and I know we are looking to get the Peterborough hub back up and running as well. And then just a question in terms of from Lucy about professional work in the GP. Is it better to refer to us or go through adult social care for a carers assessment? The way we try to operate is a no wrong door approach from that perspective. I think that one of the benefits of coming to Caring Together is that sometimes people might think they need a care assessment just because that's all they've heard of. Whereas actually it might be getting a what if plan in place or getting a carer break in place, coming along to one of our hubs will be all they need, and actually they don't need to go for a full carers assessment. So actually, if they come through to Caring Together, we can do all of our piece of work, we can give them the information about other support, and then we can do the referral for a carer's assessment if it's something that the carer wants in that sense as well. But there is a no wrong door. If someone goes for a carer's assessment first, they'll likewise make sure that the carer's registered for a what if from that perspective. So brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Jill. Really appreciated you giving that update about our services. So I'm now going to hand over to Centre 33. So we should have Becca on the call, who's going to talk about the support that they offer to young carers.
Hi, Andy. Sorry, you've got me, Charlotte.
Oh, sorry, I just saw Becca join. I hadn't seen you join, so perfect. No, brilliant. Thanks, Charlotte.
No, don't worry. Hi, everyone. I'm Charlotte. I'm the Senior Project Worker for Centre 33's Young Carers project, and I sit within the capacity building team, which I'm going to explain to you all shortly. But just to give you an overview, Centre 33 offers support and confidential advice to young people with a range of different issues, and we've been around for about 40 years. The young carers side have been around for 20 years. So we've got 5 hubs across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough: Wisbech, Huntingdon, Cambridge, Ely, and our new hub, which has just opened in Queensgate in Peterborough. Can I have the next slide, please, Andy? So we are the commission provider for Peterborough and Cambridgeshire for the young carers side, and we're split into kind of 2 teams. So obviously we all work together, but we do have our project worker team and our capacity building team. So the aims of our project worker team, they're really responsible for the assessments and delivery of support to young carers, whether that be through kind of our one-to-one support or kind of our group work. And then we've got the capacity building team, which actually is just Becca and I, and we're responsible for all the awareness raising, training and resources to professionals and volunteers working with children and families in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So in terms of our support, we do a number of different things to support young people. So we offer a needs assessment, which is a statutory assessment, and all young carers are entitled to be offered one. We will do this using mainly two different tools. Some of you might have heard of them before, but we use the MACA and we use the PANOC. And we go out and meet young people when we receive those referrals to assess what level of support they're providing and then the impact that that has on them. And then during our first meeting with the young person, we will also identify a bit of an action plan to decide actually what support that young person or child might like to receive. And then off the back of that, we can then offer a number of different support services. So one avenue we can go down is one-to-one support for our young carers. And this usually is around 6 to 10 sessions. And we work on specific outcomes that we've identified at point of assessment that the young person feels that they would like to work on. These are all carried out via our project worker team. And then we also can offer transitions assessments as well. So these are usually, so it's our year 6s. So we do quite a lot of support with our year 6s around transitioning to secondary schools. It might be kind of getting them ready to move up. It might be introducing them to their young carers champions in their secondary schools. Last summer, we had a few different groups of young people that met together that were all from different primary schools that went up to the same secondary school. So it's an opportunity for them to maybe meet other young people, but also get them prepared and ready for that transition. And then we also do a similar thing for our 16 plus. So we will be looking at really their future aspirations with regards to also their caring role, but also in terms of whether they want to access further education, what kind of employment or jobs would they like in the future, and how we can best support them to do that. We then also have some groups that we run. So we've got some targeted groups, and we also do some trips and activities. So we've got a very full and packed Christmas holiday agenda of different trips and activities across well, Cambridge, Huntingdon, Peterborough, all the different areas, allowing young carers to meet each other and also to have a break from their caring role. We also have our wonderful participation board, which are called the Young Carers Voices, where young carers work together to have their voices heard. They agree on kind of key messaging and how to communicate, like, you know, strategically in making decisions around things that are important to them, but also they really help to kind of develop and tailor the resources that we offer, whether that be through our training, some of the wonderful videos that are on our YouTube channel that our young carers have put together to show professionals when we go out and deliver training or assemblies. So yeah, that's a great opportunity for a lot of our young carers to be involved with. Next slide, please. And then we've got a capacity building team. So we work very closely with all of our partners and external agencies to basically enable young carers to be identified and supported. And that's across a range of different settings. So we do a lot of work within education. We have many kind of training sessions that are on offer to professionals, and we have our primary school programme kind of training that we deliver every year for our schools. We also do a lot around health and social care and various other kind of professionals and sectors that we will go out and deliver either bespoke training, or they can join our online sessions, which we kind of repeat every half term. And we try to reach communities where there might be barriers to accessing young carers support. In particular, Becca's doing quite a bit of work with some of the substance misuse organisations around identifying young carers in that category that can sometimes be quite hidden and difficult to identify and difficult for them to maybe access support. And the same with some areas of health too. So we're doing kind of quite a lot of work on the ground really to enable young carers to be identified and supported. And we also then do kind of assemblies too. So we'll go into schools and do assemblies, we'll offer staff training, and anything that really teams and organisations would like extra support with, we can come out and deliver. So this is our Contact Us page. So all of our referrals are made online. Anyone can submit a referral to us, so professionals, parents, young people. We will accept referrals if they're over the age of 13, they can self-refer into us. If they are under the age of 13, we will need consent in order for a referral to be made, and it needs to be parental consent. Obviously, we should be gaining consent from all young people as to whether they want to access our service, but for under 13s, it needs to be parental consent. You can drop in as well to any of our hubs, so whichever one is closest, young people can come along and access support and advice around young carers or around anything else that's going on with them in their lives. We've got lots of other teams that specialise in different areas. All of our opening times and locations are all on the website. If you've got any questions about young carers or want to talk through any kind of referrals, then do please email us at youngcarers@centre33.org.uk, and there's details there to our website and also our phone number, so you can also make referrals over the telephone as well.
Brilliant.
And I was just going to quickly say, actually, towards the end of the session today, Becca and I are leading on sort of the young carers stuff. So we've got a presentation, and also we've got some young carers coming along to talk to us in a bit of a Q&A. So if you're able to stay on at the end, that would be great, and you can hear a bit more about what we do and hear from some young carers, which will be, yeah, amazing, hopefully.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Charlotte. And absolutely would really encourage anyone who can join the sessions later on. We saw how powerful it was this morning hearing from adult carers and parent carers, and it'll be equally as powerful hearing from the young carers as well, Charlotte, just a quick question in the chat from Beth, which I thought I'd put now rather than at the end of the session, is just said about the targeted one-to-one work, what kind of outcomes might be worked towards as part of that work?
So it'll depend really on what's been identified at assessment. So usually we will complete, so we'll do kind of a needs assessment, but we can also do a kind of a My Plan, which is a much more in-depth assessment. And we will identify different areas that that young person needs support with. So it might be an understanding about their loved one's caring role. So it might be talking to them about, you know, what that might mean. It might be that they need some support around, you know, understanding, you know, them. It might be mental health that they're looking at. You know, they might be looking after someone that's struggling with their mental health. It might be confidence. It might be that they just want a space in which to talk to somebody. It might be that they want to meet other young carers that are in kind of, you know, experiencing similar things to them. It really just depends. Every assessment and the outcomes, I guess, are really quite unique. So it really depends on what that child wants support with and what they're caring for and the impact it's having on them as well. So it might be that we also need to signpost to other services or have other agencies involved. So we've got that whole kind of support network around family. Yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question, but I guess it really does depend on what's most important to them at that time and what we can do to help. But all of our one-to-one work is around exploring their caring role. So sometimes, you know, we might identify an assessment that actually that young person needs support with their mental health, and actually maybe accessing our service is, you know, it might not be the right time for that. So then we might signpost to kind of our mental health team or to other services. So it all just depends on what the outcomes are of the needs assessment.
I can imagine there's something about just setting that side of time, that time aside as well as you know what goes on within it.
Definitely, yeah, definitely, really important. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Charlotte. Thanks, Beth. Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Charlotte. And again, just to encourage people, if you can, to join this afternoon sessions, looking at sort of young carers in much more detail, would really encourage it. So now we're going to hand over to Christine, who's from Making Space Carer Support Service. As I mentioned, they support people looking after someone who's aged 18 to 65 with a mental illness. So I'll hand over to Christine.
Thank you very much, Andy. First time I've seen these slides, so we'll have a bash at it. So who are we? We provide one-to-one carer support for somebody, and that can either be a friend or a family member who is looking after somebody else who experiences mental health issues. So we do not support the patient, we support the carer. Our team is based in St Neots, and we are now covering the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. We are commissioned by Cambridgeshire County Council and Peterborough City Council to provide that service. We only took over Peterborough just over 2 years ago, and throughout COVID it's actually been quite difficult to build up our numbers and to get a known in Peterborough, but that's starting to change. Making Space is actually a Northern-based charity where their head office is in Warrington, and they are a non-profit organisation which specialises in mental health. And has been for over 40 years, and we've been working in Cambridgeshire for over 10 years. Making Space also runs day centres, have residential homes, and has just started to expand regarding their carer support service. So basically, we were the first carer support service that Making Space was able to take over, and they've used us as a benchmark for commissioning other projects. Next one, Andy, please. So, as I've said to you, we provide one-to-one support with a named support worker. So if you are unfortunate enough to be to get me as your support worker, you will stay with me. It's very much carer-led. There's no time limit as to how long we can support a carer. It's very much down by what the carer needs at any given time. Some carers just come to us for a bit of advice or information, and that's it. Others carers will stay with us for a much longer period of time, and that's absolutely fine. As long as it works for both parties, for us and for the carer, then it doesn't matter. We also do an awful lot of signposting to other relevant organisations and community projects like Centre 33 and Caring Together. We also work very closely with Rethink Mind and CGL as well, because a lot of people who experience mental health issues also have a secondary problem, often around drug and alcohol misuse. Honest and realistic conversations. Yeah, I mean, we try to have an open conversation with the carer. There's not much point sometimes in sort of pussyfooting around. Carers need somebody that they can open up to, somebody that they can have an honest conversation with. Information, yeah, we run information mornings. Recently we've had Claire Mundell, who was the chief pharmacist for the NHS, who did 2 talks. One was in St Neots and the second one was in Peterborough, and that was about medication, side effects of medication, how medication interacts with our body, our mood, and what we eat. We tend to meet the carers away from the home, especially if the cared for person lives with them. We give the carer the opportunity to talk openly and honestly in a place where they feel secure. So we will meet them in a coffee shop, in a garden centre, lay-by, whatever they want. Carers often find it very difficult to talk if the cared for person's listening, because that often causes friction. So we will try to meet them at, as I've said, a time and a place that's suitable for them, where they feel safe. I mean, I've had carers sitting in my car, and we've had a sort of like a couple of hours sitting in a car because I couldn't go into the house. I'd like to think that we show kindness and empathy to all the carers that we work with, but obviously it's also about having a realistic and open conversation with them. A lot of carers are extremely isolated. They do not want to talk to family and other members of and friends because they don't want to overload them. They don't want to burden them. So the support worker provides that listening ear, and it's somebody who isn't going to be judgmental, who will sit there and listen to them for as long as that needs to happen, and will hopefully be able to give them open and honest feedback as to what's going on within that home. Yes, we run carer groups and coffee mornings. We're actually going to Sandringham at the beginning of next month to see the Winter Lights. We're taking 2 coaches, 36 carers are going. We've also got a coffee morning / craft morning at C3 at the beginning of December. Earlier on in the year, we had 2 lots of boat trips up and down the Great Ouse on what were actually beautiful days. It gives carers a chance to have a few hours away from their caring role, and also to talk to other carers, because, you know, me and Jill can whittle on from England, but I think unless you've actually been in it and been through it, it's very difficult to understand the pressures that a carer is under. Whereas by having coffee mornings and the boat trips, it does give carers the opportunity to speak to other carers, to build up friendships, to exchange details, and to find out what works for one may not work for another. It's very much carer-led. We are
specialists in mental health. Within the team, we've got a huge amount of knowledge. As I've said to you, whoever the carer gets allocated, they will have my mobile number, they will have my email address. And if they come along to the coffee mornings and things like that, because we are a small team, they will get to know the rest of the team. So if I'm on holiday and they phone the office and Jill or David speaks to them, they will be able to put a name to a face. And that, I think, again, helps carers to feel that they're not talking to some anonymous person in an office. Next one, Dave. Next one, please, Andy. Yeah, I've gabbled on a bit. Yeah, so it is what we offer. It is a consistent approach without the name to repeat your story, because they are seeing the same carer support worker time and time again. Yes, most of our carers do self-refer. We obviously take professional referrals. We don't have a waiting list. So as a referral comes in, whichever direction it comes in, you will be contacted hopefully within 24 hours. We'll maybe get a bit more information from that person, and they will, depending on where they live, is who they will be allocated to. And as I've just said, that is the person that they will tend to stay with throughout the time that they are with us. Yet the door is always open. Carers can come back. So it's not often that we disengage with a carer. And if we do, it will always be with their knowledge and consent. But that doesn't mean to say that a carer can't re-refer themselves to the service. So even if it's 6 months, 12 months down the line, if life becomes difficult, then the carer can automatically get in contact either with me or with the office, and we will then start reworking with them again. So they don't need to go through a referral process through the GP or the mental health system. All they need to know is to come back to us, and we will start to work with them. Coping strategies and forward planning. I think that's one of the things that a lot of carers are extremely worried about at the moment, is who takes on the caring role when they are unable to do that. And I think that's something for me personally that I'm sort of on my high horse about, because I'm trying to make commissioners and professionals aware that there are an awful lot of carers out there who are coping with their role, and they are supporting their children. And some of those are in their late 20s, early 30s, who've never actually lived on their own. And I think for a number of carers, it is about who takes on that caring role when they are either unable to, because their circumstances change, or they become too frail. And it's about forward planning. And I think that's one of the things that we are hoping to get to move forward. Surveys, yeah, surveys are one of the ways that we can find out what carers think about our service, really. They are always anonymous. We welcome feedback and suggestions, often about what speakers and what things they would like us to try to arrange, because it's all right for us as professionals to think, oh, yeah, that would be nice, or that would be nice. But actually, this is about the carers, and it's about what carers want. So it's something that we've been doing over the last couple of months. And one of the things that carers have come back to us is that they want us to arrange for a coffee morning with a solicitor to come along, so that they can find out about wills, trusts, and also about, as I've just said, forward planning, how they can try to set up financial security for their children, for the cared for, so that at least hopefully that puts their mind at ease. I think that basically, unless there's another slide, Andy. Oh yeah, that's all our contact details. Please, if you either want to have a chat or you think you may have somebody who would benefit from our service, please don't hesitate to contact us. We will then get in contact with the carer. We'll carry out sort of like our own mini referral. We'll carry out our own mini assessment and just take it from there. The cared for person doesn't need to be open to the mental health service. They don't even really need to be open to the GP service for us to work with the carer, providing the carer is under stress and there is a history or a feeling of mental ill health for the cared for person, then we will support that carer. And there are our contact details. Thank you. Andy, you're on mute.
I've got so far during the conference and I knew I did. Thank you. So there was one question in terms of in the chat was about in terms of if someone has got, say, dementia and bipolar from that perspective, obviously in terms of making space would support around the bipolar side, and obviously Caring Together could support around sort of anything around the dementia side, or do you want to come along to the hubs from that perspective? But so perfect. Thanks, Christine.
Thank you, Andy.
We've heard a lot today around the impact on parent carers from that perspective. And just to clarify, just so it's really clear, so making space support it where the person with care needs has got the mental illness, not the carer having the mental illness.
No, the cared for needs to have it yeah. I mean, there are a number of carers who themselves have got mental health issues because of the impact of their caring role, but it's basically around the cared for between 18 and 65 must have mental health issues.
Brilliant. Thanks, Christine. And obviously then once they're past 65, then that's where Caring Together would be able to support them.
Yeah.
Caring Together Making Space work really closely from that sense, just like Centre 33 work really closely with Caring Together and Making Space when young carers are transitioning to become an adult as well from that sense. So as I mentioned, we talked a lot today around the impact on parent carers. So we're now going to hear from Pinpoint and Family Voice, who are our two parent carer forums, who are going to talk about in terms of what their role is and what they're able to offer parent carers, and also just give a bit of an overview about some of the rights conversation that we'll be talking about later on as well. So I'm going to start by handing over to Lisa.
Thanks, Andy. So for those of you who weren't here in the earlier sessions, my name's Lisa and I work for Pinpoint, who are the Parent Carer Forum for Cambridgeshire. And I'm also a parent carer to 3 children with additional needs. If you could go to the next slide, please, Andy. So just to give you an overview of what a Parent Carer Forum is, what we do, what we don't do, because there does seem to be some confusion around that. So we try to impact on legislation that directly relates to children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities. And we do that through gathering voices locally and feeding them up regionally and nationally. So we're part of, in Cambridgeshire, we're part of the Eastern Region's Parent Carer Forum and also the National Network of Parent Carer Forums, and those voices get fed through directly to the Department for Education and other government sectors. We work really closely with our partners in the local authority and in health to encourage co-production. So all of their policies, the work streams that they're doing, should have parent carer voices represented within them. All parent carer forums are unique. They're all set up in slightly different ways. For us in Cambridgeshire, that means that we are a charity, and we're made up of 5 part-time staff and 1 project worker, who are all part-time, term time only parent carers as well. And then we have our board of trustees as well. Next slide, please. So Pinpoint's been around since 2008 as the Parent Carer Forum for Cambridgeshire. As I said, we are a charity. We get our main funding streams come from the Department for Education, from Cambridgeshire County Council, and from the Integrated Care System, which was previously the Clinical Commissioning Group, so what most of you would know as the local health services across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. We are all parent carers, and we're part of those regional and national forums, which means that we can feed local voices and what we're hearing from parent carers into the national conversations around what parent carers need. Next slide, please. So we're there, I should have mentioned as well, we support parent carers of children from 0 to 25 with an additional need, but we don't require the child to have a diagnosis before we will offer support. So what we do is we listen, we feed back the voices that we're hearing, so it's not our own personal voices that we go into meetings with, it's what we're hearing from everybody else, and try to make those voices have influence to get better outcomes for our children and young people. We have a lot of participation events that we've recently changed to being a termly offer, one around health, one around mental health, one around education, and one around social care, so that parent carer voices are being heard by all those professionals. We try to be really responsive to the things that we hear from parent carers. So, for example, when we're setting up our workshops and our participation sessions, it will be based on what we're hearing from parent carers sort of in the previous few weeks, rather than planning too far in advance. And we like those policies within health, social care, education to be co-produced with parent carer voices and solution focused. We try to work collaboratively with parent carers, but also with officers in the local authority and health to try and get that positive outcome. And, you know, that comes through having those good working relationships. So we offer support to both parents and to professionals in terms of those participation events, but also every Friday during term time, we have a peer support group. It's all virtual at the moment, which was came out as a necessity of COVID, but at some point we're hoping to do some more face-to-face and have a more hybrid offer. But at the moment it's still all online. But those sessions are 2 hours, give or take. We're never normally out before 3 hours. And it's all about parent carers coming in, talking about what's happening for them that week and getting support from their peers. And that's also where we hear those voices to be able to feed through as well, or one of the ways that we hear those voices. And we've this was a quote that was given to us last year in our annual conference, is that we're seen as the critical friend, or I think the way that it was put is the friend who tells you that you shouldn't be wearing that dress, by officers at the local authority. So we try to be constructive with our feedback to them, but we certainly challenge the things that they say as well. As myself and my colleagues sit in those meetings, we definitely provide a level of challenge to them. Next slide, please. So we try and look at what's working well. We want to give that positive feedback as well, and then think about what would be better if, and what we should stop doing, or what's missing. So we're looking at it sort of from all angles, trying to give that the positive feedback as well as the more constructive and challenging parts. Next slide, please. So we help to identify what parent carers need, and we signpost them to services. So we are a signposting information, advice and guidance service. Our website's got loads of self-help on it, but we will always respond to inquiries as well and tell people where they can find information. Got those drop-in sessions every Friday, and we respond to individual emails, phone calls as well. We understand that the system of special educational needs and disabilities is really complex. We are all parent carers. Our website's got lots of handy guides as a sort of first port of call for parent carers, where they might find some information about what diagnosis their child has been given, or what diagnosis they think their child might need. And we address any issues where there are gaps and ask the system to respond. We try to close that feedback loop so that we're hearing what parent carers are saying, we're feeding it back into the system, and then we try and feed that back. Sometimes that's a really slow pace because change doesn't always happen that quickly, but we do try and close that feedback loop as much as we can. So we try to find supportive ways to come together. So our tea hubs every Friday, those peer support groups, and up until July, we were also running a Send Dads group, which was in the evenings. It wasn't exclusively for dads, but it was sort of to encourage those people who are at work and can't make it to sessions in the day. Unfortunately, the funding for that has stopped, but we're looking at alternatives to be able to carry on that work, because we know that it helps us to reach other people. We get lots of funding streams that enable us to do additional work. So we've had loads of free information workshops over the last few years, and we've managed to cheekily record those sessions so we can carry on using the content for the next year or so, and we're looking into ways that we can get more funding to have those workshops, because we've reached sort of about 1,000 people each year with those sessions in terms of the information that we're providing, which is often the sort of information that parent carers won't get from professionals, that can be really helpful. So it's, you know, we've done things around sleep, around challenging behaviours. There's a session ongoing as we speak about barriers to school attendance for children and young people, where it's that they can't go rather than they won't go. So those information sessions have been really, really useful. We're not resourced to take on casework for individuals, but we do have contacts and links to be able to signpost to those that can do the casework. So for example, Sendias. Next slide, please, Andy. Thank you. So in terms of the work that we do with professionals, we help them to identify what they need and how we can help to plug those gaps as well. You know, I think we're in quite a unique position where we can see the whole landscape and understand that professionals want the same things as what parent carers want. We're just sometimes all coming at it from slightly different angles, and that system is really complicated, and we recognise that nobody finds it easy. So we try and address those issues and see how we can offer support in those ways. We ask our professionals to come along to co-badged sessions or pop in to our tea hubs or participation sessions so that they can hear parent carer voices directly and take those issues back and understand what the issues are being faced by parent carers. And we've helped with additional focused work to support the local authority and NHS projects. We're on loads of their work streams, participation groups, to get sort of new projects on the way. And we're currently working really closely with the Preparing for Adulthood lead at the local authority to prepare a conference, because that we know that that's an area that hasn't got or hasn't had enough support more recently. Sorry, I'm distracted by the chat as well. I shouldn't have it open while I'm talking. So we're a communication route for families. We've got a quick and ready audience. We know we don't reach all parent carers, but we try and reach as many as we can. Next slide, please, Andy. So as I said a minute ago, we know that professionals and parents are often worrying about the same issues, just from a slightly different perspective, but ultimately everybody wants happy children who thrive. That's sort of, you know, we've all got that same common goal. So we try and join systems up. Again, you know, we see that whole landscape. So we sit in a health meeting over here and a local authority meeting over there and understand that everybody's sort of doing the same piece of work, but nobody's talking to each other. And we're often in a really good place to fill those gaps and link people together. We know that there's not enough resource and the demand for services is growing. We're currently about to hit 7,000 education, health and care plans in Cambridgeshire. And then as another approximately 10,000 receiving SEND support. So it's about kind of trying to understand or make best use of those resources that are available, and support our professionals to see what gaps there are and how they can be filled. Often when you talk to parent carers, they've got some amazing ideas that are really quick wins, don't cost loads of money. So sort of going back to what Andy said earlier, you know, just keep listening to carers. They have got a lot of the answers. So we try to make sure that there are easy to understand pathways and easy referrals. We know that's not necessarily happening at the moment, but we are still involved in all those conversations. We want children and young people and their parents to get the right service early and first time. At Pinpoint, we aim for the moon and the stars, but sometimes we understand that we do have to make do with a lamp and a torch, but we make the best of what we've got available to us. So we just want parents to share their voices that we can feed back, really. Next slide, please, or am I done? No, not yet. Carers assessments. Okay, I'm going to go for the elephant in the room, Andy. So parent carers legally do have a right to a carers assessment in the same way as any other carer does. At the moment, we know that's not happening. We're working really closely with Andy and with the local authority to try and make sure that there is a clear offer. Those conversations are ongoing. I can't tell you what the outcome will be. When I know, you'll know. Next slide, please. That's not me. I'm done.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Lisa. And yes, I'll also be mentioned about parent care assessments, so really reinforcing what you've just said there in a second when I'm on the carers' rights bit. So thanks ever so much, Lisa. So that's been really helpful to hear from Pinpoint. So we're now going to hear from Asta, who's from Family Voice Peterborough, just to talk about in terms of what their support is as well from that perspective.
Hi everyone. Do excuse the sound of my voice. I'm a bit poorly today, but I did not want to miss that for the world, to be honest. So my name is Asta. I'm a forum coordinator for Family Voice Peterborough, which is a sister organization for Pinpoint. And we do work very closely together with Pinpoint, and they are absolutely brilliant. I myself have a child who is, well, she has quite complex needs, but she's already 14, so no longer baby. So I have been in that system for quite a long time. And I'm very passionate sort of to try and help parents to make sure that all the difficulties that I have experienced when my child was young, that they would not have to experience it themselves. Next slide, please, Andy. So we are a registered charity, and the main reason we are there is, as I said, just to improve services for children with special educational needs and disabilities, as well as their families. We all are parent carers ourselves, at least most of us, and we aim to build that sort of bridge between parent carers and other authorities, such as whether it is ICB, CPFT, or local authority, just to make sure that whatever parents are telling us on the ground is actually getting feed into it. So, and to be honest, we have quite a wonderful relationship with our local authority. And as I always say, we'd rather hear it from the horse's mouth rather than making something that we have no personal experience with. You know, we might as well ask the parent carers, people who live this on a daily basis, to ensure that whatever services we are procuring, that it actually fits the needs of young people and children, as well as their families. Next slide, please. So we have been involved in some services from, design to delivery. We recently had, well, I say recently, I feel like I missed a year or two with COVID. We're doing sense strategy. So it was an absolutely amazing event where parent carers were able to come in, they were able to participate and get their views heard. And that's how the whole strategy was built. And this is our aim, to make sure that parent carers are telling us, we feed into it, but we also close that sort of gap. So rather than, you know, it just being, oh, this is what parents are telling us, we told the local authority and then we went home. That is not the case. We want to ensure that the local authority take responsibility of what parent carers are telling us. And I might not always be, you know, their favorite person in a local authority, you know, because I might say things they don't like, but as you know, our CEO said, well, tough. This is what it is. This is what parent carers are telling us. And I feel like this is my responsibility to feed into it. Now, because of COVID, obviously for the past couple of years, things have been very different for us. But I'm quite happy to say that we have started to return to face-to-face meetings as well as events. So although we offer parent carers who choose or, you know, choose to have virtual meetings, or maybe they are unable to come because of their caring responsibilities. And quite frankly, we have some parents whose children are quite complex, and, you know, COVID is still posing a massive risk. They can still come and join us virtually. But we also restarted our events. So we have recently just had our, as we said, spooky event for children who have special education needs and disabilities. So it offers for them this sort of safe space to come in and have a party, have some fun, but at the same time for their parents to meet others, to talk about their difficulties, maybe tell us what is happening and maybe find the ways that we'd be able to help. We take very seriously every single thing that parent carers are telling us. And very often we see those emerging themes through these involvement and participation events, through these parties, you know, and that's how we build our topics of importance. We usually have about 2-3 a year. And in each of the topics of importance, we cover different aspects of what parent carers are telling us. For example, this year, PFA has been quite a big one. PFA is preparing for adulthood, because very often parent carers, first of all, they don't know where to go. They don't know when it even starts. They don't know when to start the whole process, because PFA it's quite a difficult time for our young people, and we want to ensure that this journey is quite smooth. I mean, as smooth as it can actually be, if that makes sense. So for example, those youngsters who are going to college for their post-16, I know that their families are experiencing quite a lot of hardships, because colleges only offer 2 or 3 days education, some colleges 4. However, it means the rest of the time, parent carers have either to leave their job or find alternative childcare, which can be quite difficult if you have child with complex needs. So we, you know, try to ensure that the services are changing. And I know, you know, sometimes it takes a long time, but if we don't start now, it will never change. So I am setting up now face-to-face as well as virtual group for those parents who are struggling with their youngsters who are approaching, preparing for adulthood stage, to ensure that they tell us what is it that they want and what is it that we can actually do together with the local authority. Because as I said, we're quite lucky. The local authority wants to hear from us. So the same way we want to hear from the parent carers, they want to hear from us. So parent carers can engage with us during those events. We also have our coffee afternoons. We've also opened a warm hub, so where people are able to come in the evenings for, you know, for a meal, for a hot drink. We also have our Wednesdays Tai Chi sessions, as well as just drop-in coffee sessions as well, where we have people, not just parent carers, but those who also care for their adult children as well. Next slide, please. So it's just what we offer, and I suppose I should say what we don't offer. We do not have a capacity, nor we are technically allowed to offer sort of one-to-one support. However, any parent who reaches out to us who have issues, whether it may be with, with the schools, with social care, with health, with provision for, nappies, continence services, or whatever it may be. We will endeavor our best to help those families, to ensure that they have all the information they need, they know where to go. And in some cases, just as Pinpoint said earlier, like Lisa said before, they might need some more robust help that would come from, let's say, SENDIA services. So where, their children experience quite a bit of difficulties at their schools as well. But the main reason we are there is we want to provide a voice for our parent carers at all the meetings, whether it's working groups, whether it is strategic level meetings. At the same time, we are a part of national parent carer forums as well. So everything goes from the ground level. So the parent carers are telling us, and it sort of builds up. We're telling to the local authority, we're telling to Eastern Region Parent Care Forum, which feeds into national parent care forums and so forth. And I think that's a very important thing. And as I said before, we run a community center, but we also have 2 caravans that our parent carers can rent out at a much cheaper rate, which is covered by short breaks. So rather than paying hundreds and thousands of pounds, they can come for a break, and that would cost them less. And I think that's it from me.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Asta. It's really helpful just to see the vast array of different support for parent carers as well. And just to echo what I put in the chat, any sort of comments or suggestions or feedbacks that are coming up, I'm making a note of these as I'm going along, so I can collate all of these to share both with my colleagues in the other carer support organisations, obviously the parent carer forums, but also with the commissioners who sort of commission carer services as well from that sense. I think it's really helpful to identify where carers think there are gaps or where there's more things needed, or different ways of doing things as well from that sense. So the last part of this session is going to focus firstly on other support for carers that's available. So I'm going to do a bit of a whistle-stop tour. There are lots of links in here that'll be contained that people can sort of go to for more information as well. And then I'll be finishing the session about some of the sort of carers' rights as well. So we've talked a lot today about struggling to navigate what's available and what support's available. So what I really wanted to flag up is the carers directory. So in terms of the carers directory, this is something that's available for any carer or people who work with carers to look at what support's available in different areas. So you can search by conditions, you can search by locations, different sort of keywords from that perspective as well. So if you've got, if any of you are struggling with the internet from that sense, you can always ring the helpline and our team can have a look for you whilst they're on the phone and talk to you about what's available from that sense if you struggle with internet access. But it's a really helpful directory just to see all of the different ranges of organisations and support groups and activities that are out there as well. It's worth saying that on there, that's where you'll also find a lot of the condition-specific support. So, for example, things like the Parkinson's Society, Stroke Association, etc. You'll find lots of them rethink sort of carer support around sort of mental health. It'll all be found on the carers directory. Many of them will also be found in the Carers magazine. They have sort of adverts about what they do and sort of upcoming events in the quarterly Carers magazine that we publish. In terms of national support, just to flag a couple of things. So you've got After Umbrage and Carefree. So we've talked a lot about access to breaks today and the need to have a break. And they are both sort of charities that are set up to be able to help carers to have a break. So Carefree is about finding sort of unused sort of hotel rooms and sort of accommodation that's going spare and linking carers up into them from that sense. Whereas After Umbrage have a series of cottages around the country where, again, carers can go for a bit of a break. And Caring Together can refer into both of those. And often what we're able to do is also look at options around if you need, for example, replacement care. And so it's ones where, for example, as a carer whose sort of real mental health has been a really at crisis point, so we were able to provide some replacement care so they could go and have a break through one of those opportunities as well. So it's worth either having a look online or giving a call to the helpline at Caring Together and our staff can talk to you about After Umbridge and Carefree as well. Carers UK have got a series of supports. They've got helplines, they've got lots of fact sheets on different topics as well, and also a forum from that sense as well. Just say I will put the links into the chat when we're into the later session, Peter. That's not a problem as well. And then also Mobilise. So Mobilise do sort of virtual cuppers. So they do sort of cuppers throughout the week where any carer can go along just to sort of chat and meet with other carers as well. From that sense, they've got a sort of a really active Facebook group as well where carers can share experiences from that perspective as well. And apologies, Sue, I stand corrected. I thought they had more than one property After Umbridge. It's just the one at the moment from that sense. I know there were plans to get more, but I stand corrected. Then in terms of other support for young carers, just to really sort of add to what you've heard about from Centre 33. So at Caring Together, we do have support available for young carers through sort of trips and groups and activities, which any young carer can access at any time. So it's not one where you have to be referred in and then to be able to get linked into that support. If you've got a young carer who just think actually they're on a bit of a tough time, they could really do have a break over the summer holidays or Christmas. We advertise all of our trips through Inside News and on our events page on the website. And so that's where people can go online and book spaces onto them. So we've had things through pantomime trips, stuff for the circus, football coaching sessions, farm trips, a whole range of different activities going on for young carers as well. And then there's also some national different support opportunities. So we talked about siblings earlier. So SENT and SIBS both offer sort of support to siblings. So SIBS is the national charity for brothers and sisters. And so they've got support for adult siblings and also for young siblings. And so they've got sort of various different sessions going on. They've got online craft activity coming up in a couple of weeks' time. And similarly, SENS have had different activities for siblings as well. So if you've got anyone in the family where there are young siblings and you think they might like to take part in different activities, then it might be worth checking out those as well. And then finally, in terms of just a couple of other things, so the Young Carers Alliance, this is a network of over 130 different organisations from that perspective, and they offer different, they've got carer organisations, they've got schools, mental health services, all who are members, but there's a resources page, and on there, there's a practices section. So on that, in terms of if you go on to the Young Carers Alliance webpage, there's a resources page, and that's where they've got, for example, lists of books that mention young carers. They've got there's a book aimed at sort of young siblings to help them understand from that perspective as well. So there's some really useful resources on there. And then the final one is the Young Carers Support app. And just to say, I'll make sure that I'll send all of the links that are in the slides. I'll make sure they're all in the sort of information I send out, so people have got them as well. If people are here for the rest of the session later, once this session finishes, I'll put all of the links into the chat for you. But the Young Carer Support app is a national one, which has got lots of information about sort of mental health support, information about young carers' rights. But there's also a local page that Centre 33, ourselves, the local authority, and CPFT put together, which has got information specifically aimed for young carers in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough as well. So it can be downloaded for free on Android or Apple Store from that perspective. It might be worth checking that out as well. And professionals can also access it from that sense. But as I said, I will put, when we finish this session, I'll put all of the links into the chat for you. I'll take them out of the slides and put them in. And then just to add in terms of support for parent carers, so there's an organisation called Contact, which is for sort of any sort of families where the child with a disability within it. So they've got a helpline, they've got a listening ear service. They also offer lots of specific workshops for parent carers as well. So I would suggest sort of checking them out. I've seen lots of people giving really positive feedback about the listening ear service that Contact have as well, and their helpline. They've given lots of information to families around sort of finances and benefits and just what support as well from that perspective. And then Family Fund, we've talked about the sort of cost of living pressures being faced at the moment. So Family Fund offers sort of grants to where there's families with a sort of long-lasting illness or disability. And again, they've been used for a whole range of purposes from that perspective. So I would suggest in terms of having a look on there, again, they've got the information as to what you need to be eligible from that perspective. But if you're unsure, if you give the Caring Together helpline a call, our staff have had information about the Family Fund, and they can talk you through it on the phone as well, particularly if internet access is an issue or using the internet is a challenge. And then Over the Wall, they're another charity. In terms of what they do is they run various different camps for children who've got specific medical conditions. But they also do ones for their family or for their siblings as well. So they've got both in-person camps at different places around the country, and then they've also got virtual camps that they set up during the COVID pandemic, but they've now continued as well. So they're just a few different things for people to potentially have a look at and see if it might be of interest or use for you. As I mentioned, when we get to the end of this session, I will put all of the links into the chat for you as well. So I'm going to finish this session just around about in terms of carers and their rights, given that obviously tomorrow is Carers' Rights Day. This is going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but it's really just to help carers understand, and those working with carers, what carers' specific rights are. So for those of you who joined us this morning in the session about health and care professionals, you will have heard me talking about the Health and Care Act. So apologies for those who I'm repeating this for. But just to say that Health and Care Act 2022 gave carers and young carers specific new legal rights. So adult carers and young carers have got the right to be consulted ahead of discharge from hospital. That applies to a sort of a hospital where it's around sort of physical health, but it also applies to sort of mental health inpatient settings and community rehabilitation as well. Carers UK have produced a really helpful checklist for carers, which does a step-by-step guide to what you should expect in relation to hospital discharge. It's worth saying we know that's not necessarily working in practice. So we're working with the other carer organisations and the hospitals and the integrated care system in the area to really look at how we can improve carers' experiences of hospital discharge as well. Integrated care boards, if you've not heard of those, so integrated care systems are the new way in which health and care sort of provision is being arranged in local areas. So what they've been doing is taking over, so the integrated care boards are taken over from the clinical commissioning group, looking at how they fund and commission sort of health services in local areas. And as you can see, they've got a duty to ensure that carers are consulted around both the care and treatment of the person they care for, but also planning of local services. So this is again something where we're working really closely with the other carer organisations and the parent carer forums and the integrated care system to really make sure that carers are at the heart of their thinking and their work that they're doing at the moment. Because it is still relatively early days for them. The integrated care systems only came into being back in July from that sense. I think there is still an element of finding their feet, which is why we're making sure that carers aren't being forgotten as well. So rights to an assessment. So as Lisa mentioned earlier, all carers have got a right to an assessment of their needs as a carer. Apologies. So adult carers have their right to an assessment under the Care Act 2014, whereas young carers and parent carers come under the Children and Families Act. And as you can see, I'm going to do it in reverse order to talk about in terms of what it means from that perspective. So I'm going to start talking about parent carers, then young carers, then adult carers as well. So in terms of sort of what parent carers and young carers' rights are, is both to a needs assessment, but then also to a transitions assessment. And that one does actually come under the Care Act from that sense, but I'll go into more detail. And just to say in terms of, I've seen a message in the chat saying rights are no use without resources. Completely agree. Apologies, I haven't seen who's popped it in the chat. But just say again, that's exactly why in relation to parent carers, we're really keen working with parent carer forums to look at, okay, what support is available to be provided as well. To really make sure they're not just a tick box exercise for carers, because carers are busy enough as it is. So there's no point them going for a carers assessment from that sense as well, who'll be able to, if there's nothing that they can access on the back of an assessment. So as Lisa mentioned earlier, so Caring Together are working closely with the parent carer forums to really improve the situation around parent carers, because they've had legal rights to assessments since 2015 when the Act came into force, but there's not yet that clear pathway for a needs assessment or a transitions assessment. as well. So in terms of, as you can see, it's also really important that the Mental Health Trust and other health organisations are involved, because what we're hearing a lot from parent carers in particular is that they've got children who are sat on waiting lists or waiting for assessments from that perspective as well. And so it's really important that those health organisations are around the table as well. It's worth saying when we get to specific, if there are any specific questions around carers assessments for adults, we've got someone from the local authority who's new into post, so I've not been cruel enough to put him into doing the slides in his only sort of second full week. But what he's going to do is take any questions away around about in terms of actually carers assessments from that perspective as well, because I appreciate there'll be lots of questions coming through. So parent carers have got the legal rights to ask for an assessment at any time and reassessment if their situation changes. And the key around a parent care assessment is saying actually this should focus on the parent carers' needs and their well-being. There's a huge emphasis on well-being in relation to parent carers' needs assessment. It's not about the level of need of the child. We often hear that parent carers can't access support because their young person doesn't meet thresholds or doesn't meet criteria. The parent carer needs assessment is entirely about the impact on the parent carer from that sense. And as you can see, it's not just about their caring responsibilities, but also looking around sort of work, education and leisure opportunities as well. And there isn't a requirement to be a formal diagnosis in order to request an assessment. In terms of transitions assessment, again, we often hear that transitions from when the young person is going into adult services can be really quite challenging for parent carers. And so that transitions assessment is meant to help parent carers have the information they need to plan for the future. So parent carers are entitled to a transitions assessment if it's felt that the carer is likely to have needs for support when their young person turns 18. And again, that's just really emphasising in terms of actually that's about the carer's needs, not about the young person's needs. The young person also has a right to an assessment in their own right. This is specifically around the parent carer, and also if there would be significant benefit for the carer in doing that assessment. It's worth saying I can see there's a lot coming in the chat about experiences of carers assessments, and this is something that I'm absolutely more than happy and I'll be keen for the local authority to take back to share some examples. And there are some examples in the slides they provided, which I'll be talking to later on as well. So as Charlotte mentioned earlier, for sort of completeness, so young carers have got that legal right to a young carers assessment or a transitions assessment. Both of these are done by Centre 33, as Charlotte talked about earlier from that sense. But in terms of the why have a young carers transitions assessment, this is some feedback that young carers have given, which I'll just give you a second just to read that around some of the benefits for them. So as you can see here, this is really giving that opportunity for young carers and young adult carers to be reassured that the support's in place for the person they care for. So for the bottom young person to be able to go off to university from that sense, but also to be able to have that space to talk about what support they need, which goes beyond the trips and the fun activities, which are really important, but this gives them that space to look at their needs as a young carer. And I've also included a link at the bottom. So Carers Trust, the National Carers Organisation, have produced a Young Carers Know Your Rights guide. And again, that contains lots of information about what young carers' specific rights are as well. But I'll put all of the links into the chat later on, and they will get emailed out after the session as well, so people can easily access them. So I'm now going to go on to carers assessments and outcomes. So it's worth saying that these slides have been produced by the local authority, just to really give a bit of an overview. So I've just agreed to talk to them because the person who was originally going to speak is unfortunately off on long-term sick. So any questions in detail around carers assessments are ones where, as I said, they've got the member of the team who is on the call who will be able to take them back. And I can give assurances that I'll be asking to make sure that any questions they get responses to from the local authorities as well. It is worth, again, there's a link to a short video here. Again, there's lots of different links, but again, it's just so people want to watch it in their own time. But Carers First, who are a carers organisation in lots of different areas, have provided in terms of a short video about what carers assessments are and what they're supposed to be about as well. So if you're someone who prefers hearing things and listening to things rather than reading it, then that short video, it's only about 2-3 minutes long, might well be worth taking a look at as well. So in terms of the carers assessment, there's a big focus on having meaningful conversations, about really having those conversations to look at the needs of the carer and the impact of their caring role on their whole life. So not just their caring role, but their health, their families and their opportunities as well. And there's been a big shift from the local authority to really have the focus on this really detailed conversation. As Steve mentioned earlier, when he had his, it was a really in-depth one-to-one conversation. It was about 2 hours in his perspective as well, but really to look at actually in terms of whether that conversation is what's needed, or whether actually a much more detailed carers assessment will be of use to them. So taking that person-centered approach to what the carer needs as well. So in terms of some examples that has been provided as to when a carers assessment may be helpful. So in terms of whether the quality of life is being significantly impacted from that sense, or where the person that is cared for has got unrealistic expectations of the carer. So often there can sometimes be that sort of tension between the carer and the person they care for. And so a carers assessment can help to have someone outside of the household situation to work through some of these things as well. But also in terms of that need for a break. So actually if the person they care for can't be left alone, meaning the carer can go long period of times without a break, that's potentially where a carers assessment may well come in. But again, as I mentioned, I will ask the local authority to give some examples of some of the outcomes of carers assessments as well. So this is just some detail around what the carers assessment must include. So as you can see here, so the Care Act says that an assessment is entitled, they've got an entitlement to an assessment where an individual provides or intends to provide care for another adult. And again, you can see in here the things that it must specifically include. It's worth saying that this duty to do the assessment is regardless of the level of carers' needs for support. That assessment must still happen, or their financial resources. So in terms of actually having an assessment, there isn't that financial sort of question. Obviously, finances may well come into it in terms of around what support's available on the back of an assessment, but that conversation, that right to an assessment exists for any carer as well. And as you can see here, there's a range of things that are really clearly stipulated in the legislation that are required from that perspective. So the carer's needs for support, how sustainable their caring role is. So actually, if there's a real risk of carer breakdown, that's something that would absolutely be looked at within a carer's assessment. But also, what are the outcomes that the carer is wanting to achieve as well from that perspective? So we talked about the ability to work, taking part in educational training, or having opportunities to themselves as well. And again, I'm not going to read out everything on the slide here, but again, these are just some of the things that the Care Act specifies as to what carers assessments, what's involved in relation to them. So I mentioned about the meaningful conversation starting at that very first contact with an individual from that perspective. But also making sure it's proportionate. So for example, someone asked the question earlier, should you go direct to the local authority for a carers assessment, or should you come to Carer Together? And I think for a carer from that perspective, if they are just needing a bit of information and advice and they're doing okay at the moment and they just want to understand what support's available, then actually they may well not want to go for a full-blown carers assessment at this moment in time. Actually, some of the preventative work that Carer Together does might well be actually that's what the carer wants at this moment in time from that sense. And as I talked about preventative, again, that's one of the key principles. It shouldn't be about actually crisis response. A care assessment shouldn't be looking at actually what happens at a crisis situation. It should be trying to prevent the carer and the person getting to that crisis point as well. And similarly to what you've heard throughout a lot of the sessions today, it should absolutely be involving the carer as much as possible in their assessment. It is their assessment rather than the local authorities as well. And just like with parent care assessments, there is also that big focus on promoting well-being from that sense. Just to say in relation to the chat, if you'd like, I'm more than happy if you consent for me to, if you want to send me your messages, send me the details in a private message. I'm more than happy to share that with the local authority and ask them to get back to you specifically if you'd like to from that sense, because I've only seen it flicking in a chat. I'm really keen to make sure they look into it from that sense as well. So on the back of a carer's assessment will lead to a carer support plan. So really looking at how the carer's own needs may be met in different ways. And again, we'll link back to the outcome the carer wishes to achieve from that perspective. So it gives some examples here of what might be on the back of a carer's assessment from that perspective. So you can see here some of the outcomes that carers have previously shared about what the outcome of a carer's assessment has been being able to see friends more regularly, having time to get back into gardening, spending more time with their own children or grandchildren, being able to sleep better or feeling healthy more generally. And again, I'm not going to read them all out, but you can see in terms of within the support plans, we've listed a whole range of different sort of examples of support that have come out of carers assessment. So for those of you asking a question about some of the benefits of a carers assessment, these are just some of the examples that have been provided as well from that sense. As I said, in terms of carers assessment, I appreciate there's been a lot in the chat and probably lots of questions, but I will ensure that that's fed back to the local authority and ask them to provide any sort of answers or to questions or responses from that sense. And again, if any of you have got individual cases that you're really keen to be looked into, if you feel like you've been waiting for a long time, feel free to contact us at Caring Together. You can message me privately in the chat here if you'd like to, and I can make sure one of the helpline team follows it up on your place from that perspective as well. So I'm just going to finish in terms before we go on to the carer strategy update, some of the other rights that carers have as well. So if you're a carer who is also managing caring with working, there are specific rights that carers have at the moment. So if you've been working for 26 weeks or more for an employer, you do have the right to request flexible working. So that could be in terms of compressed working hours, it could be a combination of hybrid working, working from home, and working in an office or community environment from that sense. It might be doing things like 9-day fortnights, but employers have to deal with those requests in a reasonable manner. So they have to have a really sort of logical and genuine business case for denying any sort of rights to flexible working from that perspective as well. And again, if any of you are particularly interested in learning more about this, Carers UK, I mentioned about some of their guides. They've got a guide to flexible working, which I can share the link to later on, which is in the slides as well. And again, I mentioned about the short videos that Carers First have done. They've also done a short video about what rights do you have at work. So for any of you who prefer absorbing sort of video content, again, that video might well be a useful link for you from that perspective as well. And then hopefully coming soon is going to be a right to carers leave. So this is currently going through Parliament at the moment. So it's something called the Private Members Bill. It's passed its first few hurdles from that sense and has got government support. So unless there's a general election in the next year, the chances are it will go through. That's about the only thing that would stop it going through. But this would give, in terms of carers, in terms of the right to a week's unpaid carers leave. So I appreciate it's unpaid from that sense, but what we're finding at Caring Together is that some carers are using their annual leave in terms of for hospital appointments or for caring crisis that comes up from that sense. So for us, we see it as a stepping stone. I think in terms of the specific bill, it wasn't the mechanism didn't allow it to incur costs for the Treasury. So the unpaid was the only thing that they could go for. But by having the right to carers leave means that every single employer would have to have systems to know who their carers are. So it would give a really good opportunity to raise awareness of who carers are within the workplace and help improve sort of numbers of employers signing up to the Carer Friendly Tick, for example, from that perspective. So in terms of if people are keen to support that, again, if you sign up to Inside News, we'll make sure we're keeping people updated. A number of carers wrote to their MPs to get their support for the bill going through, and that really did help make a difference. So we're really appreciative for any carers who did write to their MPs around the carers leave bill from that perspective. And then just to finish, some final rights as well. As I mentioned, local authorities have got the duty to consider a whole family approach. So there shouldn't be silo working between adult services and children's. So they really should be taking a whole family approach to when they're looking at the needs for carers and their families as well. And again, this one always comes up in terms of, I'm highlighting the legal right in the Care Act, but I fully appreciate there's a difference between rights and reality some of the times. But carers do have the right to choose whether or not to be a carer from that perspective. No carer should be forced to be a carer from that perspective. And again, the duty is on the local authority to provide that support if a carer is say, actually, no, I am point blank not going to be a carer from that sense, because then you've got someone who's got care needs which are being unmet from that perspective as well. And similarly, in terms of around equalities legislation, carers have rights not to be discriminated against because of a person's disability from that sense. And again, that is something that's often come up in relation to sort of indirect discrimination to help ensure that carers are being sort of fairly treated and not being sort of unfairly discriminated or being discriminated full stop because of the person they care for's disability. And similarly, if the social services are organising provision for the cared for person, again, the local authority have got that duty to involve the carer and get their feedback when they're looking at the support that they're providing for them as well. If anyone does want any more information about carers' rights and the law, if you're interested in this particular area, again, Mobilise have got a web page with lots of different information about some of these areas in detail from that perspective. This was designed just to help sort of carers be a bit of aware, and also for those who work with carers to realise, actually, I didn't realise that carers had these specific legal rights as well in that sense. So I'm now going to sort of move straight on into our next session, where she's going to be giving an update on the carer strategy refresh. So we've got Ruth Miller, who's the Senior Commissioner for Peterborough and Cambridgeshire, who's going to be just giving an update on where things are at and the current progress with the carer strategy. So I'll hand over to Ruth.
Thanks, Andy. So thank you for allowing me to have this time to present this. So many of you will have heard of the carer strategy refresh that we've been working on. A lady in our team, Tara, was leading on it, and unfortunately she's had to take an extended leave of absence. So we have allocated this to some other members of the team, which I'll be introducing later. But just to run you through some of the stuff. So next slide. So this is an overview of how many people that we have in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough who identify as carers. This was the 2011 census, and that will have changed significantly. So we're hoping to have updated figures to present for that, but it is a significant amount of people that identify as carers within Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and the strategy is basically there to say what it is that we're planning to support, how we're planning to support people better. So next slide. So the previous strategy was a joint collaboration between the local authorities and the CCG. There were obviously a lot of financial challenges at the time. I know it seems to be a broken record sometimes, but we were looking at heavily reduced budgets, and the amount of money that we had to spend on services was significantly lower than what we needed against population growth, and we're seeing more and more people identifying as carers, and we've done quite a lot of work to look at what it is that we're doing and how we can do better, and how we can direct resources to better areas. So can I go on to the next one? So the 2018 to 2022 strategy said that we needed to work better and more joined up between health and social care to provide better services for carers. We needed to have better early identification and prevention. So we needed to identify who was a carer earlier, and so we can support them better before things deteriorate, before maybe they reach crisis, before it gets to the point where they can't care anymore. That was part of the 1822 strategy. We wanted to improve access to information and advice. So the previous strategy outlines what was done to make sure that we had better information and advice, and that was part of the front door, or the information advice service that we have. As well as looking at improving the relationships between professionals and carers. So we had feedback on how difficult it can be for people, and we really tried to outline some work to improve that, as well as improving advocacy. That was a big part of it, and better support for young carers, which is again going to be a priority for the new strategy going forwards. So next one, please. Yep, so this basically just says we are it is officially ending in 2022. So as of this year, it's going to be finishing, and we need to come up with some better plans for 2023 and 2027. Again, it's going to be a partnership project between the local authority, so Peterborough City Council, Cambridgeshire County Council, and what's replaced the CCG, which is the ICS, or the Integrated Care System. So health and social care are working jointly to come up with some more plans and further priorities. So next one. So we have done a lot of engagement work to understand what it is that we're delivering, to understand what we're doing well, and to understand what we need to do better. So we have worked with our partnership boards. We've done a lot of work with service users, partner agencies, internal teams, to get a really good idea of what it is that we're doing. We've had surveys, we've done national surveys, local surveys, and forums and things to discuss with people, voices of experience, speaking to people to actually get an understanding of what it is that's been going on, what we need to improve, what we need to do better. And that has basically been analysed to have a really good picture of what's happening, so we can come up with a plan of how we can do this, what we can do better, basically, and outline what we're going to do for the next 4 years. Next slide. So a big part of it has been the NICE guidelines. So that's the National Institute for Care and Excellence. They have guidelines that we have to follow to provide the best services. So they do all of their kind of like national research, and they inform policy changes, and they've come up with 9 priorities that they've said this is the kind of best practice, this is what you need to be doing. And we, through our engagement work with experts by experience, we've come up with the 3 most important areas for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough in particular. So that's improving information and support for carers, improving how we identify carers, and better psychological and emotional support for carers. So there are 3 main areas that we're going to be focusing on in the refresh. So the next slide, please. And this is a slide that I think Gavin is going to present if he's here.
Yeah. So I've been leading on the young carers part of the strategy refresh, and young carers take on a role which is really difficult for many children, but it's also a really critical role in many families. And within our current all carers strategy, whilst young carers are included, the focus is more heavily weighted to our larger adult carer population. In this refresh, we're looking to really increase the presence and strengthen the influence of young carers within the strategy, and just kind of give them the kind of spotlight that we feel they should have. We've been consulting with a number of different voluntary organisations, most notably Centre 33, who deliver the current young carer support service, and with some of our internal colleagues who work with young carers to inform this work. But the key work has really been when we've been talking to young carers directly, when they've had that opportunity to put forward what's important to them. And that's included conversations with commissioners. It's included young carers producing a series of videos which will go into the new strategy, which has been supported by Centre 33. And that will hopefully just put a really strong and personalised voice of the young carer into the strategy. We've found that unfortunately a lot of the data sources we used in the previous version of the strategy when looking at young carers haven't been updated in the last 4 years. A lot of that's down to COVID, but also things like the census information we touched on earlier, that won't be out until just after we publish the strategy, sometime towards the middle of next year. I think it's looking likely to be. So the kind of data that we've been getting from our service has been really key and more important even than usual in this refresh work. What we've kind of been finding is that COVID has not just had the same level of impact on young carers as the general population, but it's had a much bigger impact on our young carers in particular. And that's led to an increased number of young carers coming into the support service. And when they come in, they tend to have more needs and more complex needs when they're actually then being supported. In addition to assessments and the voice of the young carer being heard across services, the other kind of key themes that have been brought up by young carers in particular are around that importance of being identified as early as possible, as young as possible, having a range of different support options available, both targeted to specific groups, but also universal services, because obviously all young carers respond to different things, they've all got different needs, and they're all supporting people who have different care needs as well. And then the additional thing, which won't be a surprise to anyone, that's been coming out really strongly is the mental health and the fact that the young carers have real needs in this area and need a lot of support and help, and actually just people to talk to is bringing out real benefits. All of those kind of things will be added into the strategy refresh.
Great, thank you. So what are we planning to do now? So the next steps is to collate everything that we've gathered, so all of the feedback that we've had, all of the engagement work that we've done, and analyse basically what is going on, like how the services are being received, what kind of services are people needing, what do we need to change, what do we need to improve to make it better for people. Is it access, is it quality of services, is it having more available, all of those kinds of questions, and really kind of digging deep into what it is that we're delivering, so we can work towards better provisions, and everything that we do then can then link back to this strategy and to these priorities and saying, are we meeting this, are we doing this, are we doing what people need us to be doing, and the strategy will outline how we're going to do it, basically. So it's not just going to say this is what we're going to, this is what we need to do. It's going to say this is how we're going to do it. We're going to work with social care, so the local authority is going to work with the integrated care systems and our partners to come up with proper solutions about how we can improve things, and look at where resources are spent, and we're looking to have a draft strategy early next year, so ready for feedback for people to kind of say, this is good, this is bad, this is what we want, why haven't you mentioned this, that kind of stuff, and then we're going to look at having a final draft by kind of spring 2023. So if anybody is interested in getting involved, there should be some contact information on the next slide, I think. Yeah, so there are 3 main people that are going to be working on this from commissioning the local authority. It's going to be Lisa Hall, whose email is there, as well as Michael, who's our new commissioning officer, as well as Lisa Sparks. Her email isn't on there, but Lisa can put you in touch with her if necessary. So if you want to be involved in the refresh, or want to have a look at the draft, or have any kind of feedback to give, things that you'd like us to consider, then please do reach out to Michael or Lisa, and they can get in touch with you and let you know what it is that you can do, all the options of engagement, and if you want to be involved in maybe some of the solution making. So it might be that we come up with finding that the information and advice isn't as great as it should be, and then coming up with some some ways of how we can get information out there to people, how we can identify carers sooner, and how we can improve mental health support for carers. So yeah, so that's it. It's a real whistle stop tour of it, really, because I think Tara would have had more to say on it, but yeah, we've got Michael and Lisa taking over, so that's it from me.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Ruth. And just as again, there's a lot of comments in the chat. There's a couple of points I was really keen to pick up on. I think there was a few comments around just in terms of actually what's the point of a strategy from that perspective? Why have a strategy? Why not do the doing? And just to say from my perspective as working in a carers charity, I think one of the benefits of having that sort of strategy is actually saying it's not just about what the social workers are doing, it's not just about what local authority are doing, but actually it's about the wider organisation. So just to give an example, actually for us, we want to see more referrals from GPs coming through for carers. Carers will be in contact with their GP, or the person they care for will be in contact with their GP. We're doing lots of work to try and raise awareness with GPs from that sense. Centre 33 are doing lots of work from a young carers perspective, but actually sometimes we need the system to help give that buy-in and that commitment to help us do our work, so we can get those carers identified. So that's the sort of thing that a strategy can help us with what we're doing from that sense. Or if a strategy identifies, right, this is what carers have said is needed, that's where then we can then turn around to our commissioners and say, well, carers have said they need more of this, and then say, well, actually, what do you want us to do differently, or is there, you'll need to find more resource for that? From that sense. So I think it's just worth saying it is a partnership approach. It's not just about the local authority, it's about where do employers fit into this, it's where the community organisations fit into this as well. And I think the other point I just wanted to really pick up on was just someone said about having an action plan. And absolutely, this is something that we're really keen that we said we want to do, is once you've got the strategy, great, what next? What's going to happen? Who's going to do it? And when by, from that sense. And I think that's one of the things that we're really keen. So it doesn't just become a strategy that sits on the shelf and we dust it off again in 4 years' time from that perspective. So just to give that reassurance as well, because saying that for us it needs to be that sort of that living live document. And we've got things like the Carers Partnership Board. There's a sort of a carers internal group within the local authority. These sorts of bodies which carers are involved in, are members of, they should be holding local authority, the integrated care system, ourselves as carers organisations to account to make sure it is happening from that sense. Perfect. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, because in terms of just see if there are any questions from that perspective. Just to flag it, once we finished in terms of questions, the next session will be at 3:45, which will be the Young Carers Advisory Board video leading into the Young Carers section. So I would really strongly encourage people to come and join us for that session. But I will stop sharing my screen just to see if anyone's got any questions about any of what's been covered in this session around sort of carer support or the carer strategy or carers' rights from that perspective as well. Christine.
Thank you, Andy. Regarding the carer strategy, I would hope that it looks at the
Complexity of some of the carer issues that we as outside organisations are dealing with. You know, when I first started, it was sort of tea and a sticky bun in Tesco's. It is not that now. It is extremely difficult with some of the very wide-ranging issues that carers are having to deal with, and also the tremendous impact that the caring role is actually having on the carer themselves. It impacts on both their physical and mental well-being, and this is the toll that being a carer takes on them over many, many years. And I would sincerely hope that the strategy takes that on board and tries to look at ways of reducing the pressure that is on carers. I know that nobody has a magic wand, but I do sometimes feel, and please forgive me for saying this, that some people tend to live in their ivory towers and they do not have any concept of what it's like in the real world now. That's it, done.
Yeah, I'd fully support that, Christine. I think from our perspective, we have seen a sort of a significant increase in number of carers contacting the helpline. Where, as you said, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, even 18 months ago, it might have been a bit of general information and support, and the odd call where you've got someone at real crisis point. Whereas we're now seeing, in terms of carers, where actually on a quite regular basis, their mental health's at crisis point. So yeah, no, I completely agree from that as well. And it's worth saying that's exactly the sort of thing that we've also flagged up in the Carers Speak Out report that's just come out, because again, so many carers, it's a mental health crisis in relation to carers. I think we're really concerned about that as well. Brilliant. I saw Joy, your hand was up and then went down again.
No, I think I've said everything I need to say on the chat. A lot of these issues are too huge to put into easily comprehensible words. Do people agree? Bob does, yes. Bob knows me, yes. It is something that we have to think about carefully. I spend a lot of my time planning letters and emails to different bodies and working ahead, and yes, thank you.
Thanks, Joy. I completely appreciate that. And it's worth saying, if anyone has got any thoughts or comments on the back of the conference that they want feeding in, do please feel free to send them through to us at Caring Together, or if you'd rather, the Carer Speak Out platform is still live. So again, it's just into whatever way works for you from that sense. And again, if the stuff you want feeding through into the carer strategy from that sense as well, really keen for carers to have that opportunity. Any other questions or comments at all from that sense? And just Peter, just to acknowledge what you said in the chat, I appreciate frustration. I know it can be a real frustration of how many different organisations, well, they do this, they do the other, they do this one from that sense. And I think that's where it's our job to help join the dots up, rather than saying, oh, well, you've come to us, but actually, well, we don't do that, you go to them. Actually, it's about taking it off the carer and say, right, this is where you need to get up to, but let us get you there from that perspective. Because I do appreciate, actually, if you're caring for someone with Alzheimer's, for example, you might come to Caring Together to register a what if plan. You might want a carer's assessment from the local authority. You might want to link in with the Alzheimer's Society. You might need a referral to occupational therapist from that sense. You might need to register with your GP as a carer from that sense as well. And actually, in terms of, it might take in all of your time and energy just to make that one phone call. So to then be told, oh, great, here's 5 other phone calls for you to make. So I think that's a key part as well. And it's worth saying similarly, in terms of if ever any of you have sort of negative experiences that actually you don't have time to be able to sort of feed into people, but you want it to be shared back, again, don't be afraid to send it through to us at Caring Together. Really often I get carers emailing in, for example, they might have had a negative experience at one of the hospitals. And that's where, again, we can really easily send it through on your behalf, if you'd like us to, through to the patient experience team, through to the carer lead from that perspective. Because again, I appreciate sometimes you want to share your feedback, but you just haven't got the time and the energy, actually, from that sense. And so you don't want to have to tell your story twice and say, well, I've just told Caring Together everything that went wrong. Now I've got to go back and tell the hospital or PALS everything that went wrong, or Health Watch everything that went wrong as well. And then Natalie, just to sort of respond to your point, saying completely agree in terms of actually for carers, organisations and services, it's our job to try and make it as easy as possible by communicating. And that's why, for example, this conference has been organised in partnership between the different carer organisations. That's why we have things like the Carers Directory, where any carers organisation can put their information on there. Any carers organisation can put their information in the magazine, so that actually it's as easy as possible when you've got lots of different organisations for carers to be able to get to. Because I appreciate it so frustrating for carers where they're going for years battling on, only to then find out there's this service down the road that could have really helped me, but I didn't know from that perspective as well. Any final questions at all? If not, just I just want to say from my perspective, a thank you for everyone for being so open and honest, particularly in the chat from that sense. Again, I hear from the helpline these frustrations coming day in, day out, and so that's where it's our job to keep amplifying your voices through things like Carers Speak Out, through forums like this from that sense as well. And just to say on the carers active chat material, absolutely. By recording the session, it means that all of the chat has been recorded, so I can then share the extract as well. I've also been noting down key themes that have been coming through, so I can then feed them back to the other carer organisations and also to the commissioners as well from that perspective. Because there's no point in you putting it all in the chat and thinking, great, it's just disappeared into Zoom and it'll never be seen again from that sense as well. Brilliant. Well, if there's no further questions, then the next session said will start at 3:45. That will be a film produced by the Young Carers from Centre 33, really helping to give a really good introduction into what their lives are like and the challenges that they face, but also what support you can provide. So do come along at 3:45 if you can, and that'll lead us really nicely into the final couple of sessions of the conference, focusing all about young carers. But thanks ever so much for everyone for joining this session.